You know, it's interesting how music has become such a power in my life. I remember when I was young, I would stay with my grandmother. My grandmother was she was a self-taught pianist. Growing up in the South, she would play these hymns and spirituals, and she would insist on my learning. Say, son, come and sit by my knee. I got something to tell you and something to teach you. I said, okay, Granny. And she would begin tapping out these imaginary notes, if you will, on her knees. She couldn't afford a piano at home. And she'd start singing, great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord, unto me. And I would look at Granny, and Granny would tilt her head back, and all of a sudden these tears would begin to roll down my grandmother's face. And at the age of 3 and 4, I could not possibly articulate what was happening to Granny. So I'd tap Granny on the knee and I'd say, Granny, Granny, come back. Come back, Granny. You okay? My grandmother would tilt her head forward, and there was a tacit agreement that Granny was just fine. I remember being in that room and not knowing how to explain what was coming through this voice, this vessel. But I knew that it had changed the room. It had surely changed Granny, and it had gotten a hold of me too. Who would have ever thought that something that wonderful could expand in such a beautiful landscape called Granny's front room, with a voice that was so raspy and out of tune. And my grandmother had one of the worst voices I've ever heard in my life. I'm just telling the truth. Okay, teach me, Granny. I'm going to put one finger in my ear and listen with the other. But what would eventually catch up with me was not so much how she sounded. It's what resonated in the room and what resonated through me. You know, as the youngest of 3 children, my brother is almost 15 years older than I am. My sister is 11 years older than me. I'm the youngest grandchild on my father's side by over a decade. You know, and there are perks that come with being the youngest child and the youngest grandchild. And at a young age, I found those buttons to push to get exactly what I wanted. You know, my mother and father were very strict, especially my father. But there were times when I would find out just when it was proper to manipulate the no's that they had given me on getting what I wanted. So, Mom, can I have this? Dad, can I have this? An emphatic no. But there was this one thing called charm that I learned as a child. And it came through a smile. Please. Worked every time. There were perks, and then there were other things that sat on the other side, called Charles Holt's Guide to Living. I mean, from the first time that I stepped out, my grandmother said, he's going to be a preacher. I know he is. I mean, we grew up in a neighborhood that was founded by a missionary, and he said in 1868, many years before I came, that where he was going to put his foot was the exact place where he would build his church. So in line, my grandmother thought, he's going to be in line with all of these preachers that have come through Lake Providence. My mother thought, oh no, he's going to be this great businessman, and he's going to take corporate America by storm, you see. I was a great athlete, and my uncles and my cousins used to say, no, he's going to be a great baseball player. Great baseball player. We're going to see him on the big tube one day. And you know, as a child, to continue getting what I wanted, I thought, I'll have to acquiesce to all of the dreams of everybody. Do it all. So I started going to Sunday school and going to church every Sunday. Good little Christian boy. Did well in school, made all A's. Graduated college and wow. Wanted to play professional football, had a stellar football career and got to this point in my life and didn't get picked up by any team. And so I started working for IBM. Wow, this made my mother really happy. I called my mother and I told her, I said, Mom, I just signed on with IBM. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah. All of that money, the fast track that you're going to be on, and all those benefits. That's good, son. Well, little did she know that 6 months into working for IBM, they give you a development book. I was thumbing through one day, and I got to a page where it asked a couple of questions. Where do you see yourself at IBM in 2 years? Where do you see yourself at IBM in 5 years? And I politely picked up a pencil. I looked to my left, and I looked to my right, and I wrote, not here. That wasn't my suit, no pun intended. I thought, maybe the grass will be greener on the other side. Maybe it's just my time with IBM. Maybe I need to leave and go to another company. So I did. Left and eventually went to Atlanta and started with another company. And from the day that I started to the following year, things were kind of rocky and chaotic. And after a year, they fired me. So I'm sitting at my desk reading this letter of termination, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to call my mother and tell her that I've been fired. She was still distraught over me leaving IBM, you know. But I need to talk to somebody. So I called one of my friends. He's now a mentor of mine. And I said, you know what? I am sitting here at my desk reading this letter of termination. They just fired me. He said, oh, good. I said, good. I said, well, maybe it's good for you. I said, the only resolution that I get is somewhere inside of me I feel at peace, but I have bills to pay. So how can that be good? He said, you know what, Charles? Sometimes we just have to follow another path to get to our passion. He said, and you know what? I know that you only think it's a hobby, but you go to these jazz clubs every night, especially on the weekends after a long week, and you tell yourself, you're just washing the week off. But what you're really doing is you're stepping further into something. You don't know it yet, but you've already stepped into it. And I said, what is it? What is it about music? What is it about me singing at these jazz clubs? And he was right. I had started singing in these jazz clubs. I wanted to wash all of that corporate stuff off of me. And I would begin to sing those songs that I remembered from childhood. Then this God shall get, them this night shall lose, for the Bible says, and it still is news. All of those tunes came rushing back to me, but they had never left. You see, music would be at my elbows when I played. It would be at my heels when I ran down that football field. How could you get away from it, Charles? I thought. Yeah, there were preachers, but there was music that went along with it. And any time in the South you hear a good story, there's some music behind it. Come here, boy, let me tell you a story. My daddy taught me. It would go with it too. So you'd sit down here and listen to these things. And as a child, they would begin to saturate you. Even those tunes that my grandmother taught me. I resisted them, but I couldn't help but hear them in my mind, because they were actually a part of what had also resonated in that room with Granny too. So I thought, okay, I'll jump in. I'll jump in midstream. Just jump in the deep. Started performing. Got a big break. Got a call from Kenny Leon. Kenny Leon was the artistic director in Atlanta at the Alliance Theater, and they were doing a premiere of the Amen Corner, which is based on James Baldwin's novel. And he called me, And he said, Charles Holt, this is Kenny Leon. You don't know me, I don't know you, but there are 3 people in the show that I'm directing that's about to premiere in 3 weeks that say you are the person to fill this void that we just have. Someone just left the show. And I don't have time to audition you, so I'd like to offer you the role. That's what I said, too. I said, yes. He said, under one condition. I said, what's that? He said, you better be good. You know, that was a big treat in my life to be on stage with some of the greatest performers that I think are alive. Greatest dancers, singers, actors. But the gift came one night when I was about to go back on stage for the top of Act 2. Places, places, please. This is your call to places. Places to the top of Act 2. And I began to step out of my dressing room, and I hear a voice say, it's time. So I'm thinking, let's see who else is in the room. I look around the room. There's no one else there. I think, okay, you're working too hard. Something is going awry. In that moment, I hear the voice again, Charles, it's time. Immediately, my mind rewinds back to a year prior. I met a gentleman by the name of Adrian Bailey. He was down in Atlanta doing Boys from Syracuse, which is another classic, and we had mutual friends in the show, and he said, I heard you can sing. Why don't you sing a little bit for me? And I sang for him, and he said, you'd be great in this show that I'm getting ready to go back to New York and premiere. And I said, what's the name of the show? He said, Smokey Joe's Cafe. You ought to go get the soundtrack and listen to those songs. And I did. And I tell you, I would find myself walking down Peachtree Street on my way from one job to another. And I'd strike a pose. Whoop. You know, I would come back to that present moment and I'd think, wow, what just happened to me? But something obviously was after me. And I was after it too. Just didn't know at the time how to get to it. But I was on my way. So in that moment, I returned back to my dressing room and I think, wow, that's what the voice is trying to tell me. I should move to New York. I'm going to move to New York. I went and purchased a one-way ticket to New York. Drastic, isn't it? Drastic for someone who grew up in a tiny, tiny community based with the church as its center. Never, ever have I lived outside of the South. All of that is at my feet. But I'm ready to open the door. And as soon as I open the door, my mother appears right in front of me. My mother has a way of communicating with us that is interesting, especially when she knows you're about to say something that's a little off the path of regular communication. And so I called my mother and I said, hey, Mom. I said, I'm getting ready to move to New York. She said, let me get something straight, son. She said, you graduated from a top-tier college. You got a job with IBM, making a lot of money on a fast track, all those benefits. You leave IBM, you go to another company, same scenario. You get fired, and now you're coming to me to tell me that you're moving to New York to be on Broadway. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go to the yellow pages. Go to the business section. Thumb all the way through till you get to the letter P. When you get to P, I want you to thumb all the way down till you get to the word psychiatrist. That first listing, call it. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. You set that appointment, go in and tell them all your troubles. When you come out, you'll be all right because you've lost your mind. I said, yes, Mom, I will go see the psychiatrist, and of course, acquiescing yet again to the dreams and to the wishes. But there's only one thing, I said. She said, what is that? I said, I've already purchased my ticket. I'm going to New York. In that moment, I knew that I could not articulate to my mother what was happening. I didn't even know how to speak to what I felt inside of me. All I knew was that something was calling me. And it was calling me to move to a place that I had never known before, physically and consciously. Never had I ever endeavored to want to be on stage. I'd never taken a dance class or an acting class. Only class that I had vocally was with my grandmother in the young adult choir at church. But I knew something greater even than those things were calling me. So I stepped out, moved to New York July 6, 1996. Stayed with a friend of a friend on the Upper West Side, West 87th, between Columbus Avenue and Central Park West. And I got there and I put my things down on the floor and I ran outside to the corner of West 87th Street in Columbus, and boy, what did I see? There were children everywhere, people walking. It was a beautiful day, taxis whizzing down the avenue like they were on the Indianapolis Speedway. It was high vibration, and I looked up into a beautiful blue sky, and I said, wow, this is great. Skyscrapers everywhere. And I remember throwing my arms open and saying, I'm home. I'm home. I'm home. Same thing that had generated that energy in my grandmother's living room was the same thing that was speaking to me then. I knew that something was speaking to me. I just didn't know what it was. But I wanted life, and I wanted more of it. I set myself out on a path to be on that Broadway stage, and I auditioned for Rent. Rent was the hottest show in New York in 1996. And I went downtown and stayed in line from 9:30 to 7:30, only not to get into audition. I walked back upstage, a dejected Charles Holt, past a newsstand where there was a backstage, the Actor's Bible, and there was an audition the following week for Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm going to go to that one. Went and got my sheet music, got all ready, and the next week came upon me really quickly, and I was about to go to the audition, and all of a sudden I hear this voice. You know, you're not going to get in this time. It's going to be another long line. These auditions come dime a dozen. Why don't you wait on the next one? Then I heard the other voice say, why'd you come in here in the first place? Why'd you move to New York? Why'd you relocate? What called you here? And I jumped up out of my seat and I went to the audition. 450 people wrapped around the block. But this time I got in. Had prepared my music. I went to Eddie Rabin, who was the accompanist, and I said, I'm going to sing something from Aladdin. I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, splendid. And I put the paper down. I put the paper down on his stand, and all of a sudden I said, no, I don't want to sing that. I want to sing something else. And I don't know what I want to sing. Help me, Mr. Rabin. He said, sing an anthem. I said, sing an anthem. Which one? He said, sing America the Beautiful, Charles. They have an X on the floor. All auditions do in New York, and you have to stand behind the X. And I remember I stood behind the X. And my grandmother, she had made her transition the year before I moved to New York, but she was still with me. I got so nervous I forgot the first line of America the Beautiful. And I hear this voice say, just open your big mouth and the words will come to you. Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed its grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. And I couldn't forget my mother and my grandmother, and I said, and crown thy good with sisterhood from sea to shining sea. America, America, America. And I stood there and I watched this panel of judges leap to their feet. Thank you, Mr. Holt, thank you. And just like a good little Southern Christian boy, I looked at them and I said, thank you. And I walked out the door. In 3 days, they had whittled us down from 450 to 12. Only 6 were going on tour. The monitor, he comes in and he says, look, only 12 of you's going. If I call your name, stay. If I don't, get your stuff and get out. That was quite clear. Eddie Talton Jackson, stay. Seth Hampton, stay. Danielle Grucius, stay. Charles Holt, stay. They called my name. The funny thing is the first person that I wanted to run and tell that I had just gotten the national tour of Jesus Christ Superstar with the original Jesus and Judas, Ted Neely and Carl Anderson from the 1972 motion picture was who? My mother. I called my mother. Mom, guess what? I said, I just got the national tour of Jesus Christ Superstar. Jesus who? I said, Mom, it's a play. You know, I had to explain to my mother, we didn't come from a theatrical background. Went on tour with Jesus Christ Superstar for 6 months. Got off tour with Jesus Christ Superstar. A month after that, I was invited to come in and sing for Smokey Joe's Cafe, the show that started it all. February 1997. How many of you have ever been to New York or ever heard how New York is in February of 1997? It was freezing. We're standing up on top of the block at the August Wilson Theater, waiting to go down to get on stage to sing 16 bars, 16 of our best bars. And they had stacked us, 24 to the stage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Charles Holt, come and sing your best 16 bars. When you finish, step back. 3 days, they whittled 600 people down to 24. I come in for the last 24. They say, Charles, they really like you. 45 minutes later, I get a call from Richard Frankel Productions. Charles Holt, we would like to welcome you to the first national tour of Smokey Joe's Cafe. From Smokey Joe's Cafe, I went to Europe. I played the first African American in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And no, I did not call my mother and tell her that I was playing Rocky in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. After 6 months in Europe, I came back and I got a call from Disney. Lion King. This is 1999. Lion King was top of the world. Called 4 people in. It was only a 4-month contract. They called me in and they didn't even ask me to sing a song. They just wanted to scale. La, 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 and dance. Said by 10:30 tonight, someone will be hired. So I waited all day. 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, no call, 10:30, no call, 10:31. Someone else must have been cast in the Broadway cast of The Lion King. So I called one of my friends who I had known, who had auditioned with me, and looked on my cell phone, and there was the message alert going off. I said, wow, that's interesting. No one has called me all day. Went to the message alert. Charles Holt, this is Mark Brandon. Please give me a call. We've been trying to call you all day. I called Mark Brandon. Charles Holt, we finally got you one. Welcome to the Broadway cast of The Lion King. What was a 4-month contract turned out to be 4 years and 8 months. December 17, 1999 was my first show. Changed my life completely. Went from Jesus Christ Superstar, which was like a kid in a candy store, to Smokey Joe's Cafe when I was learning the business of the business, and then went to Europe, and now I'm here on Broadway. Wow. In 3 short years. Called to places again. If you all saw the theatrical performance, stage performance of Lion King, and you remember the big elephant, big Bertha the elephant, I was in the back right leg of Bertha the elephant coming down the aisle. So they call us to places. Places to the top of Act 1. This is your call to places. Time stopped. I'm here. I'm here. We proceed down the aisle. And I look out of my costume, and tears are just streaming down people's faces. Children's eyes are just in amazement, unbelief, disbelief. And I get to the top of the stage, at the crescendo of this, it's a circle of life. It's a circle of life, and it moves us all. And something said, look out into the audience. And I looked out into the audience, and that pose that I struck on Peachtree Street, what I saw in that pose was what I was beginning to see out in this 1,800-seat theater that was packed with people. And something said, remember when you called it into existence, you didn't know what it was going to be, but you took some steps and you said, yes, I'm going to see because something was calling me. After 3.5 years, after 8 shows a week, it's a grueling schedule. The Broadway schedule is a grueling schedule. Rehearsals every Thursday and Friday. I had begun to hear Lion King in my sleep. And I'd wake up and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I go, City Who and Gunya. Hey, wait a minute, I'm not in the show, I'm in my bedroom sleeping. So I called my mentors and I again said, you know, there's a change coming because I'm going to leave the Lion King now. I think it's time for me to go. And of course they said, no, Charles, there's something there for you. There's something else there for you to get. And I said, I think I've got most of it. But I stayed. And one afternoon before the show, before the 8 o'clock show, I went to the theater and I went to the stage and I laid on the stage and I looked up at the lights and the catwalk, and I remember I asked the question that would forever change my life. I asked, why am I still here? Why am I still here? I've been here long enough, and I know that it's time for me to move on, but the other question is, why am I here anyway? I'm at the pinnacle of musical theater. I'm on Broadway. Not only am I on Broadway, I'm in the Lion King on Broadway. This is the pinnacle of musical theater and the biggest show in the world. And I want to leave. What's calling me? What's next? And my mind began to, of course, go back to December 17, 1999. And I heard the voice say, you remember when you were coming down the aisle and you looked out of your costume and you saw all of those faces, those tears? Do you remember when you sat at your grandmother's knee and she tilted her head back and all you could see was tears? You didn't know what was happening, but you knew that the life was changing. You knew the room was changing. You knew that you were changing. You knew that everything in the room was changing. That's it, Charles, because it has never been about you. It's been about what comes through you. Now you get to change in consciousness and understand that every single thing has set you up for this divine moment to experience the fact that you, at your greatest pinnacle, is a vessel. And I get to come through you. I get to course through you. And yes, I do change the room. And I change you too. And somewhere in my mind, I agreed to say yes I said, yes. If my grandmother could do it, so can I. If all the demonstrations in that community that I grew up in, if that was any indication to the way that my life could turn out, then I say yes. I want to be used. It was interesting because I was done with church at that time. Done with it. As in never going back again. The little Baptist and then Pentecostal boy who used to shout and dance in the aisles and speak in tongues was done with it all. Lion King had actually, within those years, become my sanctuary. And after Lion King in New York, I said, I'm going to move to L.A. Move to L.A. What was the first question my roommate asked me? Want to go to church? I said, absolutely not. I don't do church. He said, well, actually, this is not like church. I said, do tell. It's Sunday. He said, no, everybody's accepted here. Everybody's loved here. I said, yeah. Everybody is heard here. I said, okay. And then he said, and you can feel it. I said, you can. He said, yes. I said, okay, I'm going to come. I'm going to be late, but I'm going to come. I said, by the way, what is the name of this place? He said, it's called Agape. I said, oh, wow. Carl Anderson used to tell me about Agape. I said, okay, I'll come. Walked in, and of course I walked in. Service had already started. They were moving right along, and I saw a seat on the wall. I was headed toward the seat, and this man about my height was up on stage, and he was carrying on, and he said, right where you are, if you are conscious and aware of it or not, but right where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be. You're in your perfect place. And there was this defiant rebel in me that looked at him and said, how dare you tell me that I'm in my perfect place? How do you know? Still washing that whole thing of how I felt about church off, you know. But something inside of me said, of course. And you know you are. And he said, Ricky, help them feel it. And Ricky Byers Beck with her back was to me, but she hit a chord. And it was the same kind of chord that my grandmother used to pretend to play on her bony knees as she taught me these hymns and spirituals. Dum, she'd say, dum, 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 dum. And something inside of me resonated with that. I had run all my life just to find what I had started with, which was this musical melody, and it had informed me that, yes, you are on your right path, and I'm here to help you carry forth with it. Use me, oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. That became my song. That's all I want, is for you to use me. And it hasn't always been pretty. You look at me and you see this gentleman who appears to wear a nice suit and have a really nice shaved head and can dance and speak and sing. But I tell you, I spent nights in my car sleeping. This was after I moved to Los Angeles, thinking that I had moved to Los Angeles after this intuitive hit, and yes, I'm on my path, and then found myself living in my own car. But something inside of that, yet again, said, you're on your path. You're on your right path, Charles. You're finding your voice. Because I sure wanted to find it. I had spent so many years of my life acquiescing to the dreams of other people. And I was ready now to find my own way and my own way of delivering and revealing and demonstrating what this universal brilliance had in store for me. So I started writing books. I'm on my second book now, which is about my father who made his transition in February and the tumultuous path that we took when I was growing up, and how all of what he said has now come back to me, and it's now these gems of wisdom. And so I ask in this, how could it all be like this? Spirit, tell me, how could it all be like this? And the only thing that I hear from God is the intellectual mind, the natural mind, the surface mind cannot begin to fathom the things that I have for you. I have scripted your life so that you can walk further into your greater yet to be, if you will only trust me and trust the path. That's the reason why we continue to say yes. Because we're continuing to find our voice. And with all that our eyes see and our ears hear, yet there is that, some say, a still small voice that resides inside, the inner sanctum, the indwelling. It is the essence of who we are. I invite you to continue to listen to this voice. It is the voice of your calling. Let us pray. Right here in this moment, in this space, in this time, we do give thanks for all that has been said and done, everything that has resonated with us, the vortex of energy that has been created in this room that we'll never have this outpicturing again. We're grateful for this. We say thank you. Thank you. We couldn't have scripted it ourselves. There's something far beyond this universal intelligence that is continuing to speak to us even now. And we surrender by saying yes. Yes, speak to me. Speak to my heart. Give me the words that will bring new life. Knowing that all that has come, the past, the good, the not so good, the bad, and the awful, has set us up to leap into our greater yet to be. We've been made to be beauty. We've been designed to reveal peace. We've been chosen to give the very best. Excellence at the seat. And so, Spirit, we just give you thanks for this day, for the air that we breathe, for the life that courses through us even now. How wonderful and grateful this is to know. Yes to love, yes to peace, yes to joy, yes to healing, yes to giving, yes to living, yes to singing, yes to dancing. My heart dances. Dance, dance, dance. Oh, what a joy it is to be here on the planet right now. To be a part of what is unfolding. And to know that we too are participants in this great unfolding good. We give you thanks, O Spirit divine. God, we are grateful, forever grateful. And we release this, knowing that it's already done. As we walk our path of goodness, we say, and so it is. And so it is. And so we let it be. Amen.